We acknowledge the Wadjak people as the traditional owners of the greater Fremantle Wallyup area, and we recognise that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important today. I'm Councillor Jeff Graham. I'm in the chair tonight because Councillor Jones, the normal chair, is on a leave of absence up in Bali, the lucky fella. So I've just introduced some people around the table to start with. From our left, we have Councillors Andrew Sullivan, Ben Lawver, Sue Groom, Aidan Lang, and Mayor Hannah Fitzharding. We have administrative support from Mel and Michelle, and planning support from Chloe and Russell. A lot of people will know, and the heavyweights are here tonight. See Mr. Dougal, Mr. Tattersall, and Mr. Stone. So welcome everybody. Disclosures of interest by members. Nil. Responses to previous questions taken on notice? Nil. Public question time. Now, this is an opportunity for members of the public to speak on something that is not on the agenda tonight. So if you have a question or a statement you'd like to make to the council or the council, the time. Is there anybody in that position? No, that's good. Any petitions? Deputations? No. Special deputations? No. Presentations? One presentation, Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. That'd be great. I just wanted to note the passing today of former councillor Henty Farah, who I served with in the 90s. I know that the Mayor will speak to this next week, but I just wanted to note that tonight. He was very, very actively involved in so much strategic planning, heritage planning, helped really shape the Fremantle that we see today. Served for a very long time on the Fremantle Society, including, I think, time as a president. But from me personally, he was always a very strategically progressive thinker, whilst also being, a staunch supporter of retention of our heritage and our culture in our community. And at the end of the day, he gave so much to this community right up till the end. His death was quite sudden, and just an unbelievably decent bloke. So I just wanted to note that, and I'm sure the Mayor will have more to say next week. Thank you.
Thanks, thanks, Councillor Sullivan. Yes, very sad day. Confirmation of the minutes. I will move the minutes of the planning meeting dated the 6th of September. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Lawver. All those in favour? Elected member communication. Yes, I'd just like to echo Councillor Sullivan's sentiments on Henty Farah. He was a councillor here for Eastward from 1988 to 1998, so he did a fair stint. Not only was he a terrific councillor, he was also a great personal friend of the Graham family, and he will be sadly missed, and our thoughts and love goes to Kendall and his family. So, Vale Henty Farah. On a brighter note, the committee meeting tonight is mostly the last. You're all in a bit of a history here. Could be the last planning committee meeting as it has been known at Fremantle for a very long time. As the council goes down to 10, it's still to be decided, but there may not be a standalone planning committee. If there is, it'll be the same, but if not, this could be the last one. So I'd just like to mention that. Sadly, it is also Councillor Groom's last meeting. She's a retiring councillor. So I'd just like to say a few words and thank Councillor Groom for her wonderful input in the last 4 years. We've been on the council together. Very thorough, meticulous, fair and friendly and great to work with. So, Sue, I don't know whether you want to say a few words at all, but over to you.
Thank you for that, and thank you for your kind words and your support over 4 years. I just thought it would be interesting tonight to reflect on 4 years on planning committee. When I joined the planning committee, I had a good working knowledge of the planning system, and I had spent some time in the state government looking at planning reform. So it's been very interesting to look at planning from the other side of the fence. And it's certainly been a time of equal parts frustration and maybe some fun and and some deep satisfaction. So it has been really satisfying when we've been able to influence better outcomes. Either through influencing the officers' thinking, bringing a design perspective to that, or influencing what proponents were putting on the table. And when people have engaged effectively with council to get better outcomes, that has been really satisfying. It's been really frustrating to see how ineffective the planning system often is and what a blunt instrument it is, and that how it can't accommodate or tries not to accommodate, very creative design often works against that, and on the other hand puts us in a position where sometimes we have to approve things that we think are really poor outcomes. And for me, whilst it's been a real pleasure to work with proponents who are really keen to get good outcomes, it's been equally kind of mind-blowing to me at some of the really unwillingness to work in a broader context that we get from proponents, and that has surprised me. And also reflecting just on the ability of a council such as Fremantle that is quite small and struggles with our resourcing, and all our ratepayers know about that. But dealing with a lot of really complex planning matters, the heritage context, the real need for growth, the opportunity in so much of our land to realise a whole lot more there. And for us to be able to keep up to that with our strategic planning is an incredible challenge. And the strategic planning process is so slow and unwieldy that we actually, as soon as it's done, it's almost out of date. And that's a really deep flaw in the system. And the other flaw that really annoys me is that most of that work, once it's done, has no real weight. So it's a due regard document. So all the work that community might invest in thinking that they are engaging with us on what their city is going to look like gives them no power. The other thing, that there's this kind of raging debate about who should the decision maker be, whether it's state or local. And my sense is that if the planning scheme if we were able to keep that up to date and it had more power, that wouldn't matter, because it would be a more effective tool to guide real decision making. But, I've really appreciated the wisdom that my colleagues bring to this, a commitment that we've had as a committee to get good outcomes for the whole community, and to really bring that perspective to considering our decision making, sharing our frustrations, and really want to acknowledge the support we get from the officers, because we make you work really hard. We ask questions at the last minute, and there's a lot of debate and consideration goes on, and we push you hard, and I've pushed you hard, and I acknowledge your patience and generosity with that. So, thank you, everyone, and good luck, because it's not going to get any easier.
Thanks, Councillor Groom. It may also be my last committee meeting as well, depending on the results of the election on April the 21st. But anyway, I won't dwell on that too much, except to say I have enjoyed my time working with the councillors that have been on planning over my 4 years, and that's been Councillor Sullivan and Groom for 4 years, and Councillor Jones and Councillor Lawver Lang and Mayor Fitzharding. It has been a good thing as well. The thing for me is trying to get that balance between the applicant and the community. It's not easy given all the planning policies, as Councillor Groom has just alluded to. And there's a misconception out there that the community seems to think that we make all decisions behind closed doors on a Tuesday night. Well, in 4 years, I must have missed all those meetings, but we do get lovely briefings from the officers, and that's as far as it goes. So, but anyway, thank you very much, everybody. If I'm not here, and I might be a winner if I'm not here, perhaps. Who knows? Rightio. Moving along. We are up to reports and recommendations. The first item tonight, we've got a number of speakers. PC 2310-1 Clontarf Road, which is the new freehold subdivision. We've got two speakers for the officer's recommendation. Now, you get 3 minutes to come to the stand there. At about halfway through the 2.5 minutes, we will give you a bit of a dingle, and then you get about 30 seconds to wrap up. If you haven't been here before, a lot of people have been here before, so they know the drill, but some people haven't. The first speaker, Diane Robinson. Yes, could you speak into the microphone, please, and just state your name and address, and away you go.
My name is Diane Robinson and I live at 17 Butterworth Place, Beaconsfield. My home is actually backing right onto cell 14, which is on the far right of the plan, the purple and green homes. I'm absolutely appalled by this plan. I can't believe that it's like tins of sardines all cramped together, especially when you look at the housing that's to the right of it, Butterworth Place, and the housing around there, where they've got cell 14, which is 14 houses which back directly onto my property. There is no space in between, there's no laneway, and there are 5 houses there, so you've got 14 houses backing onto 5. My neighbour has 5 houses backing onto one property. It's appalling. The noise and the congestion that is going to come from this development. There's no area there that I can see for parking. There is parking allowed for all these houses, but there's only parking for one as far as I can see. Many people have 2 cars in their family, even more. They have visitors. There's no space for parking in this whole development, and it's just totally crammed in. The houses backing onto my property are 2-storey houses. I'm a single-storey house, so they'll be overlooking me, and that's my space that I have as my outdoor living, which at the moment, the reason why I came here was because it was a quiet, peaceful little cul-de-sac. It's not going to be that anymore if this kind of development can go ahead. I really think it needs to go back to the drawing board and reconsidered because it is just way over the top. Yeah, it's just going to be a nightmare for anybody living there. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Diane. Yeah, we'll take those comments on board when we discuss the item. Next speaker, Julia Wade.
Hi, similar to Di, I'm here to discuss this proposal because we are quite outraged that this plan has even come to fruition to be presented. As somebody said, we living in Fremantle and Beaconsfield, we want to be involved in how Fremantle develops and how it looks. We would like the main things: parking, sustainable housing, and we would like to see this develop. We're quite excited to see it develop, but we want to see it developed with like for like. My husband and I, we live in the same subdivision as Di. We live in number 2 Keedy Way in Beaconsfield. In that subdivision there, we live on a 275 square metre block. We live in a lovely home. We built it about a decade ago. Our neighbours in Mather Road that are existing are all quite complimentary about this subdivision. But boy, I tell you, it's tight. But it's enough room. With the smallest blocks in our properties, in our subdivision, is around 250 square metres. The single mum that lives next door, she's able to put a trampoline out the front of her house for her kids to play on. We've got veggie patch and we've got vegetable fruit trees. Now, where in this subdivision are people going to be able to do those sorts of things? Yes, there are some green spaces, but there's just not enough. Andrew mentioned that we haven't seen the architecture. No matter how fancy you dress up a pig, it's still a pig. It's just too tight. Where is all the parking going to go? when I look at how many houses are on these laneways in our subdivision, at the very end there is a laneway with these homes. These homes that are there are a lot as proposing, and already we have had major, in the last 10 years, issues with parking on that small area on Vicarage Close, where the council have been involved in moving houses and moving cars on because there's not enough parking. These are lovely homes, 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom homes with double garages, but you get 3 people living there. The garage is full of storage, so their cars need to be parked on the road. That's a laneway. They can't park there, so they're now out on Butterworth and out on Keedy Way and Mather Road. Now, when you look at how many houses are going onto laneways, even on Clontarf Road, they can't park on Clontarf Road. They can't park on the laneway. And I see that there's a green space in this subdivision that goes on to Sedalic Park. So are they going to be parking in our subdivision, walking through, nipping through to their home? Or are they going to be parking on Clontarf Hill on the public space? Surely developers have a responsibility. Where are their visitors going to be parking? Why should they be relying on council land across the road or roads parking across the road to be able to provide parking for their own residences there? There's no way that these places that they're going to be able to park in their garages. Sure, some might, but you know, if you live anywhere in Fremantle, that you will know that these new subdivisions that are these tiny spaces, the cars are parked like even just further up Clontarf Road, heading away from the ocean, up towards, there's a row of about 12 tiny little villas that have all been developed there, and they were all parking across the road on an empty block of land. It's just consent's been given to these tiny little places, and we see it all around us as overflow parking, and parking is an issue in Fremantle.
Julia, sorry,
anyway.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap it up, thanks.
Yeah, no, and that's about it. And just, you need to give people space in a house to be able to live. This doesn't do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. We have, for the applicant, Lachlan McCaffrey, is it? Yep. Lachlan?
Councillor Graham, I've got just some handouts of 3D elevations that I'd like to circulate around. Is that okay? Good evening. My name is Lachlan from Stockland, the proponent and applicant of the subdivision. Beaconsfield, we propose to be a diverse medium density precinct, which will include a range of 1 to 4 bedroom single houses, multiple dwellings between 2 and 3 story in height, positioned around generous and clearly delineated north, south, east, west corridors of open space. Laneways are provided throughout the subdivision to activate areas of public open space and street frontages, to remove vehicles and crossovers from street, and to create a low-speed pedestrian and cycle-friendly environment. The public open space and streets will be heavily landscaped and will deliver tree canopy in excess of 20% of the city's urban forest aspirations, further supporting a range of sustainability commitments across the site, as well as within the individual dwellings. We believe the proposal responds appropriately to the heart of Beaconsfield Master Plan, reflected by the north and south, east and west pedestrian link. We note that the widths of the POS have been a topic of concern from the city. However, the proposed widths are in excess of the nominated widths within the heart of Beaconsfield Master Plan. Furthermore, the proposal provides much needed housing supply and diversity in lieu of the base code R25. Tonight we propose an alternate recommendation for consideration by the council to carry forward. This being the subdivision in its current form to be supported, subject to the following modifications and conditions. We note the modifications are in line with the concerns of the city, mainly centring around public open space design and the movement of pedestrians at a district level. The first condition is to incorporate a minimum 2.5 metre dual pedestrian and cycle pathway, both east and west from Colworth Street to Butterworth Place, and north to south from Strang Street to Clontarf Road. This has been included in the information circulated as the 2.5 metre dual use cycle pedestrian path, which we've had our consultant sketch today to include universal access all the way through north to south to Clontarf Road. The second condition we propose is to prioritise the pedestrian connection at Culver Street by either widening the east-west POS link or by removing the road reserve. This is included in the pack also, demonstrating our aspirations for a pedestrian priority zone, which will eliminate cars and provide the 2.5 metre dual use path as well as mature trees. The final condition is to request the officers to provide the WAPC with all standard recommendation conditions in line with subdivision approval. We do note that we attended the City's Design Advisory Committee on the 11th of September and did receive a positive response. The overall site response addresses the surrounding internal and external streets with house frontages in lieu of garages and crossovers. This supports the delivery of the urban tree canopy. The provision of a public open space between the north and south, reflecting the vision of the Beaconsfield Master Plan, and an east-west pedestrian link encourages movement throughout the site. The diversity in housing stock was also noted in response to the demographics and lifestyle aspirations of the broader community.
Lachlan, can you start to wrap it up? Thanks, mate.
Yep. Extensive green space and POS greater than the standard requirement of 12.27% is proposed. We've proposed sustainability initiatives in line with an all-electric community, utilising green material and material reuse from the demolition on site, the provision of productive community gardens and waterwise landscaping, as well as maintaining minimum 7-star homes throughout all homes constructed. We thank the City for their time tonight, and we hope that the proposed recommendation can be carried forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Lachlan. No other speakers on this item, I don't think. None were recorded.
May I ask a question?
Yes, certainly. Oh, sorry. Yeah, questions to the applicant. Yep.
So your email to us today and your opening remarks suggested that there is multi-housing on the site. Can you explain to me where? Because I can only see detached house. Well, not
yeah,
detached,
sure. So the tenure structure proposed is the freehold title, as well as through our consultation with the planning team and the DPLH regarding our Fonzie one-bed options. They're included as the parent site, but they will be constructed by Stockland as multiple dwellings.
And why have other forms of multiple dwellings been disregarded by you? Because that was obviously kind of what we were aiming for, is more diversity in that sort.
Yeah, I think we've certainly landed on the diversity of stock, being 1-bedders, 2-bedders, 3s and 4s across 14 individual housing designs in respect to the multiple dwellings. I suppose our delivery model and what we propose in our feedback from the 200 local residents that we've been to, there is a demand for this terrace-style housing that is very popular for first-home buyers, downsizers, as well as young families.
I just wanted to clarify, you referred to a meeting of the Design Advisory Committee, which I think was the 11th of September, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
So there was a number of recommendations made by the Design Advisory Committee. You said broadly that you integrated or you were supported by the Design Advisory Committee, but when I see their recommendations which go to reconsidering the repetitive housing model in particular, I'm not sure that anything did change following their review. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, I suppose the feedback from the Design Advisory Committee was that the proposal was well considered, particularly in relation to the architecture, the broader alignment with the Heart of Beaconsfield Master Plan. From that, I suppose, Design Advisory Committee and that feedback, noting that was only on the 11th of September, we have taken that on board, particularly in relation to the dual use path, which we're proposing on the north to south connection as well as east to west. That was a critical aspect that Patrick at the Design Review Committee advised of consideration of the cyclists from a regional perspective to ensure that they could cross residents accessing the POS or people with prams on a single footpath.
Okay, can I follow that up? So it does sound like there was no change made in terms of the repetitive housing model, but in terms of the connection through the drawings that you've given us, this yellow one here, what it kind of shows me is that there's a pedestrian, direct pedestrian path and a zigzag path that would enable, I suppose, wheelchairs or
universal
bikes.
access, yeah.
Is it correct to think that that takes up now the entire green linkage that was proposed between the Central Green area and Clontarf Hill?
That's, I suppose, consistent with the previous, I suppose, universal access, which was the recommendation from the DPLH through our workshopping, was that portion of connection between the laneway and Clontarf Hill should be of universal access from a regional perspective. What we've included in this sketch is based also on the recommendation at the officer level, as well as the Design Advisory Committee, to also include in steps that would cater for pedestrians to also access the bus stop on Clontarf or access the amenity of Clontarf Hill.
So just to be absolutely clear, there's a 332 square metre wedge, if you like, between your laneway and Clontarf Road.
Yep.
And that would be entirely now taken up with concrete?
It would be the requested universal access path.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yes, Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. Just following on in that area, Clontarf Road, the lot creations of lots that are required to face Clontarf Road, the levels of the laneway that services those compared to the levels of Clontarf Road are quite different. And I'm just wondering how it would be proposed that houses on those lots actually have frontages onto Clontarf Road, where the front door faces Clontarf Road and is presumably at street level. What are the sort of level changes through there, and
yep.
How does that get handled? Are there upside down houses or?
Yeah, so I suppose there's a lot of consideration, I suppose, of this site and the broader topography challenges, particularly from a street level. It does look relatively flat, but there is a 3 metre level difference from Clontarf Road down to the proposed laneway. The response, I suppose, to that, in lieu of simply putting up a retaining wall and turning it back on Clontarf Road, we proposed to, I suppose, champion Clontarf Road and the outlook to Clontarf Hill. So the dwellings there, it's effectively a stepped product with an undercroft garage or a basement level garage. And then the dwelling obviously sits on top of that to make up the 3 metre level difference across. In respect to the front doors accessing Clontarf Hill, that's another challenge, I suppose, in terms of, in lieu of stepping the product further, we've proposed 4 steps down, so 700 mil level difference between, I suppose, the garage or the front entry door to the footpath on Clontarf Road. And that's obviously been the design response.
Just given the comments that the Mayor, or the question the Mayor just raised in terms of that last section of the POS linkage, which also suffers from that 3 metre
yep.
Level change, and the fact that a stepping down to your house is normally not a desirable outcome. Was there consideration of actually a more graduated benching of the last 2 lots of houses or housing blocks, where they start to have to rise up towards Clontarf Hill? And if not, why not? Because it seems that the outcomes that are being forced on the in the design are the result of not looking at benching up towards replacing, I guess, what would have been the natural ground levels.
Yeah, I suppose, just on this, I can certainly provide some information regarding the proposed building pad levels to demonstrate the stepping. Effectively, those 2 cells in the lead up to Clontarf Hill, and I suppose shared within the design review panel pack that was part of the information provided, you can see that the centre of the POS is relatively flat, and then it is quite a severe rise from, I suppose, the POS level up to Clontarf Hill. We have proposed to step the second cell in also, so that is a step product, and effectively includes 4 steps at the front to get up to those homes, but also the challenge, I suppose, of providing, from an engineering perspective, a level road to enable refuge collection and vehicle ingress and egress. But more than happy to circulate the information to demonstrate.
Yeah, no, the only comment was that the Heart of Beaconsfield originally had a roundabout on Clontarf Road, as kind of imagining it to be more flat to your kind of point. But in dealing with the proposal, we felt that the roundabout there is on a bend on Clontarf Road, and that it's actually a blend of all of the different constraints around that whole precinct. Because if you do raise that ground up to sort of have a more traditional kind of interface, the impact to the residents at Butterfield, it becomes like a substantial retaining wall. So we're trying to make sure we have a minimum, and thank you for your comments earlier. I try to have the the least impact to the surrounding residents that are there today. Oh, Councillor Sullivan, have you finished? Councillor Law, then.
Yeah, just a quick question. I want to thank my fellow councillors and the mayor for your questions. They're all very, very informative. Mine is around tree canopy. You mentioned that there was in excess of 20% canopy coverage planned for this development. And it looks like you, in your drawings here, you put a tree just about in every little spot that you could. And I'm just wondering if it's actually feasible to fit trees at the front and the back and multiple trees in the front of 151 square meter lots. 2, this looks a little bit different than the drawings here, where it's pretty, what you just handed us, where it's pretty open compared to the public open space presented here. The canopy coverage looks a little bit less, I'll just say. And I've noticed some of your other developments in Pierre Waters and Avonlea and places like that aren't really known for their canopy coverage. So how are you going to do things differently here to achieve whatever percentage above 20% that you're actually hoping to achieve?
Yep. I suppose just with respect to the 3D perspectives, these are, I suppose, derived from the architectural model. So this isn't, I suppose, the architectural renders, I suppose, for clarification. So you certainly take on notice that the I suppose, landscape concept within those renders is pretty underdone, particularly in comparison to how aspirational we're being from a canopy perspective. We are proposing 22% canopy cover. All the nominated species have been selected from the city's preferred species list, as well as consultation from our landscape architect and the city's landscape team. In respect to, I suppose, the private lot landscaping, it certainly is acknowledged as a challenge within this product, but we're certainly, I suppose, proud to say that the proposed tree planting in line with the medium density codes has still achieved the 9 square metre deep soil zone within the individual courtyards of the units. And we're proposing permeable pavers within those courtyards to still facilitate the healthy growth of those trees, as well as within the front setback area to provide the additional tree and the amenity. In respect to our broader subdivisions, whether it be Piara Waters, Averley, and the like, we certainly acknowledge the challenge within a medium density project of this scale to try and provide the tree canopy. We've tried to be ambitious, and particularly with our project engineer within the laneways, which are 6 metre wide laneways, full of servicing, whether it be water, power, gas. We've tried to relocate those services where possible to provide trees for additional amenity within the laneways through our workshopping with the city, which was nominated as a key thing. So what we've done is relocated services to accommodate trees also within the laneways. So we've proposed 52 trees within the laneways across the site, and to support the growth of them, given the density and the space within the laneways, we're proposing tree cells to ensure the health of those trees long term.
Thanks, Lachlan. I think we've sort of getting the picture a bit here, so we could go on all night just with this. Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll move into the item. Okay, no more. Thank you very much, Lachlan. Okay, so committee, before I move the officer's recommendation, I just want to make sure you've got the additional officer comment. You've got a proposed amendment from Councillor Groom, just acknowledging that we actually can't accept an applicant's alternative recommendation from the floor, even though it was a good try. And this is actually advised to the WA, the West Australian Planning Commission. So it's not up to the council to decide on what happens on this site. Sadly, the WAPC will be the determining authority on the approval or non-approval of this subdivision. With that, I will move the officer's recommendation, PC 2101-1, which is on page 34. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Groom. I think we might indulge the committee if we could and move straight to Councillor Groom's proposed amendments, unless somebody wants to speak on the item beforehand. Are we happy to do that? Yep. Okay, Councillor Groom, to you. So you move it and then get a seconder?
Yeah, so I will move an amendment. I will take it as read and speak to it.
Yep. Do we have a
once we've
seconder?
moved it.
Councillor Sullivan. Okay, Councillor Groom, you're on the floor.
I am, but I'm just catching up, so bear with me. So I thank the officers for the work that they have done in considering this, and I also acknowledge the work that the proponent have been doing with the officers to try to resolve some of the concerns. I agree with the officers that we've still got a way to go, and that that needs to be our advice to the WAPC. So a lot of that I've left as standing, but I do want it to kind of really encourage us as a council to put forward and to make it really clear that we are keen to see density on this site. We are keen to see good development, and we are keen to keep working with the proponent to get that response. And I don't think we're that far apart, but the places we are far apart, I'm not prepared to kind of waive at the moment. And that, that's what I'm hoping to share with my fellow councillors. And for me, they are these concerns about the nature of the green space and the amount of the site that's been committed to that, and the risk of greenwash. So to the Mayor's comments, we've got a wedge of green space that's actually just pathway with some landscaping around it. So it's not actually creating that green amenity or green corridor that was intended, because the whole thing is given over to circulation. To Councillor Lorva's comments, when we look at the 20% tree canopy, 50% of those trees are on private lots, and they're private lots at 150 square metres and are green title. So the proponent has absolutely no control over the planting of trees in those lots or the retention of trees in those lots in the long term. And you don't have to go very far. You actually don't have to leave your seat. You just need to look at Google Maps to know that this built form in Perth does not deliver any tree canopy within the lots. It's just not happening anywhere. And whatever that's about, where people are scared of the roots, the leaves, I don't know what it is, but I can't sit here and accept that this will be a 20% canopy outcome, because there is no evidence to support that. It's fantastic to put the permeable pavers in, but again, private property, green lots, there is nothing to keep those there in the long term. It's just a reach out, and the owners of those properties will do what they want. And the evidence suggests that mostly those courtyards are ending up fully paved in most of these examples across Perth. So the plan as it isn't really delivering those outcomes in terms of landscape, whether it be the green corridors or whether it be actually the canopy cover, the genuine canopy cover at the end of development that we would hope to see. And the other thing for me is the lack of density. And I acknowledge that there's 1 to 4 building types, and they're all townhouses. There is no diversity of typologies, of types of tenure, no multi-unit. they're all townhouses, so there's no accessibility. People who are wanting to age in place or living with disability, not many options for them in this development. There's no affordability elements. It's all going to be a price point that's a high price point that's kind of trying to leverage the South Fremantle price points. So it's just that diversity we'd like to see. They're using some of the parts of the site that are the real interface with Clontarf Road or with the industrial area that create that opportunity for extra height and extra density without the impact on the residential, the adjoining residential, and that would then allow the development to transition more between an established residential form and an industrial form to create that diversity as we move across the site. Yes, it could be built at R25 at the moment. We wouldn't support that. It could also be built at R160, and we would support that, and it's falling well short of that. So we would like to work with the proponent to see where are the 2 or 3 opportunities on this site to set aside some land that in the future could go to a more multi-residential outcome or an affordable outcome, just something a bit different. And how do we really lock away those outcomes of the connectivity and the green space to genuinely deliver what you are committing to deliver? So they're probably the really 2 key points for me. We've got a whole lot of planning words around that, the bits that it does and doesn't meet, and the outcomes we're looking for. But for me, it comes down to those key changes that I'd really like to see for council to fall in behind this proposal.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on this? Thank you. Councillor Sullivan.
Thanks, Councillor Graham. I helped Councillor Groom put this together, and I just wanted to clarify, because the one that was printed in the additional documents is the one that's up on the screen. There is some other modifications. I'm assuming that they would be dealt with as minor amendments after we deal with the amendment, or is the proposal to go straight to that? Is that two-tiered?
It's a bit two-tiered, yes. Very late notice on the other minor amendments.
So I just wanted to just ensure that that's what we were doing, because everyone needs to be aware of that. So there are some subtle changes to this that will come next, hopefully, if this gets up. I did want to reiterate what Councillor Groom was saying, and I share many of her perspectives. As one of the councillors that was around when the ideas for this site and other sites were being formulated and put into the planning scheme and into policy, it's fair to say that there was a fairly high level of aspiration as to what these sorts of areas could become. There's a strong commitment at this council to not see endless suburbia taking over all of the Banksia woodlands, north and south. There's a commitment to higher density. There's a commitment to diversity and affordability and the like. And what was put in the scheme was very aspirational. And I think many of us understand now that some of those aspects are quite unachievable in today's market on a site as, I guess, distant from the city centre as this one is. It is still a very well located site. However, it's on major transport routes. It's incredibly well located to amazing recreational amenities and shopping facilities and the like. And so there is still that expectation that this will perform very well in the market, and that there is an opportunity to achieve a greater level of diversity that is what is being put forward. And particularly at that interface, I think in Naylor Street, near Culver Street, where you would expect that sort of product to be achievable, even in today's market. We all acknowledge that the cost of building for multiple dwellings is significantly higher than the cost of building for the product that you're proposing. But of course, there is some tempering of that with the land value within having less square metre per unit output. But it's also an incredibly large site, and I think we've had this conversation with other developers on much smaller sites, and they have come to the party and produced a greater diversity of product, including genuine multiple dwelling product and other forms of product. And Naylor Street particularly suits that, and I believe would be achievable. There isn't a great need for a lot of commercial in that area. Obviously, we have an amazing commercial centre just over the road, and between you and that centre, there is likely to be more. So, we understand that when we talk about mixed use, we're actually talking about diversity, I think, in terms of product, in terms of residential product. And I'm really hoping that that can be achieved, even just as an entrance gateway to this subdivision. It's also wanted to emphasise, it's really welcoming that the site has now been secured by a developer that is likely, to act on the site immediately, has the capacity to do that. It's not going to sit there. It's not going to be land banked. We understand that this is a really great opportunity for this development to go ahead. And it is product that is needed. And I did want to address a little bit the issue, the concerns for the neighbours to the south, to the residents to the south. We can't continue to roll out the sort of subdivision that occurred to the south. Fremantle already has a huge amount of family-capable housing, a large amount of housing on much larger lots. What it desperately needs is the diversity of housing and that's on these smaller lots, because the cost of land these days and the cost of land development these days is so high that we have to actually deliver that sort of product. But having said that, when we developed the scheme for this area, we were very conscious that there does need to be transition between the existing subdivision to the east and Sardelic Park and this development. And so heights and those sort of things have been factored in there. Some of the issues that you raised, I think, can be reasonably handled in an outline development plan that follows subdivision. But the issue of parking, I think, has already been picked up in the motion, and there is some concern that we're trying to squeeze lots of trees into the streets, and we're also trying to squeeze lots of parking into the streets, and probably sooner or later something's going to give. So in some of the areas, I think the parking probably is underdone. And I just wanted to emphasise that we understand that concern, and we would be looking at it. The interesting thing is there is no road connection from the existing subdivision to the east and this subdivision, and that will significantly assist. In terms of the really important issue for me, and I've been working on it since before 1992, so please excuse me if I'm a little bit passionate about it, and that is the green links, not only just through this development, through the heart of Beaconsfield, but also for the whole region. We are blessed to the south with amazing regional parks, many of which have fantastic dual-use paths that allow for a really active lifestyle in South Fremantle, connecting all the way down to Woodman Point, to Mount Brown and beyond. And those regional spaces, those regional open spaces, already have all of those sort of facilities. And it is beholden on us to make sure that our community in Fremantle is able to be connected to those connected to South Beach via the tip site and the like. And it's essential that we do it right. So to have a dual-use path connection in a regional sense that relies on a whole bunch of switchback is just an absolute weak point in the network. And I will, really push back on that, because it's an area that I think can be resolved in a much better way, but it doesn't seem to be on the table for conversation at this point in time. And that's one of the main reasons why I can't support the subdivision in its current form. There are lots of things in our recommendations and our amendments that go to detail, and some of those things are probably, negotiable in a sense, because sometimes, a bit of POS squeezing there gives you the extra POS that you need over here, and that's all, doable. But there are some things for me which are just purely fundamental, and that is one of them. The only other thing I would say is that in terms of the product diversity, look, I am actually reasonably happy with what you've been proposing. It's really just comes down to that multiple dwelling aspect. I think it is the right fit of development typology for that area. I think it would, sell really, really well. It gives a lot of people that wouldn't be able to afford to live in Fremantle anymore an opportunity to have a family, to have a place close to the beach and to amenities. And I think for that reason, ultimately, I'm very hopeful that you can make some amendments and that we can ultimately support a subdivision like this and really bring it to market as soon as possible. So, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Sullivan. Anyone else wish to speak at the moment? No? Oh, Mayor Fitzhardy.
I was going to have to turn their mic off. Thanks. Look, this is a really tricky one. I think just to sort of echo the points for clarity, I really would have liked to have seen at least some lots reserved to get some density multi-storey type product in here. I know it's not a typology that, as a developer, Stockland is particularly inclined towards, but neither are a lot of developers in Perth. What we see in Freo is when it's built, it's sold. There's 70 apartments over the road at Yoke that demonstrate that, because there is incredibly high demand for it. What we're seeing on other development sites is, product just pricing itself out of the current desirable range in Freo. And, yeah, I won't go into it. I think it's the benefits of density done well are really, really clear. It's a state government objective. And one of the reasons I will, support these amendments of Councillor Grooms is I certainly don't want to send the message to the WA Planning Commission that we're fine with not getting that density done well outcome. We're not fine with that. We really want to see some density in the form of proper medium density done well in Fremantle. So if we don't send that message here, we're basically giving an acceptance that this sort of, dense but very flat outcome is something we support, which I don't think it is as a council. Secondly, I think, I applaud universal access. I think that's a great thing, but you need to leave some green, because that is actually a green corridor. When you look at it through the heart of Beaconsfield Master Planning, it is clearly a green corridor. In this, it's a grey corridor. So you do need to achieve two outcomes there, but you may need more space in order to do that. So I will, be supporting the amendments that are up here. And it's not because I don't want to see development of the site. It's not because I don't want to, work with the developer. I absolutely do. I think, that there's some good wins that we can have here. But those are just two fundamental points that really concern me.
Thanks, Mayor Fitzharding. Anyone else wish to speak? No? Okay. Oh, Councillor Lane.
Just jumping on the end there. I won't repeat anything any of my colleagues have said so well. I do appreciate the applicant coming forward. Unfortunately, I won't be able to support this application for the reasons mentioned. I don't need to look too far about what kind of environment might be built here within about 50 metres. If you ever visited Fulston Way, there's 2 pencil pines down the whole street. That's about all they can fit in. But it's not just about the canopy, it's about the amenity. And Councillor Lorber touched on some of your showcase sites that you have in Perth. I think you've got a really good opportunity here to create a new showcase site for Stockland and a new showcase site for how things can be done better in Perth. It's in a really great location. You're a 5-minute bike ride from South Beach. This stuff will sell really easily. I just think that's the opportunity for Fremantle here, is to build something that people are attracted to and want to live in forever. And also the opportunity for Stockland is to create something new for Perth and really raise the bar for everyone else. So encourage the applicant to come back, and hopefully we can work out and create something that's really setting a new level for Perth.
Thanks, Councillor Lang. All right, no more speakers. So the amendment by Councillor Groom has been moved and seconded. All those in favour? That is unanimous. So back to the substantive recommendation. Anybody wish to speak? Councillor Sutton.
So yes, there's the tweaking of the amendment with some minor amendments that came fairly late. So just to explain that to people, we have a midday deadline on Tuesday to submit amendments, which for something as complex as this, working with Councillor Groom and going backwards and forwards, and it didn't quite get fully edited. And so I've gone back and improved some of the wording, but also there was a submission that was put forward by the Friends of Clontarf Hill, which also raised a matter which is in the amendment. So if you can perhaps put it up on the screen, I will need your permission, Chair, to give consideration to it, obviously, because it's an amendment that came after the midday deadline yesterday.
Thank you. I might just ask the officers to comment. I believe they've seen the amendment. I haven't had a good look at it because it came late today. And just get their view on what perhaps we could do with this. And just could you, who's going to explain, Russell or Chloe? Just the amendments, if you just. No, I know, no, but you've had a look at them, I think, or. They're always problematic, as we know, getting late amendments, particularly on a big item like this. Now, if it's only tweaking of words, I'm quite happy to accept it, but if there's a substantial item in there that the officers should actually make consideration to, I'd prefer not to, because we need to have officer support on this, or officer comment. So, Councillor Sullivan,
I can assist you in that. I think the majority of it is wording changes, which are tweaks, so just trying to clarify what the intent was, and also remove any grammatical problems. There is one right at the end, and I'll point that out and be quite open about it. It's the very last one, so the new J, which is basically dealing with things which were in the report, but also dealing with the matter that was raised by the Friends of Clontarf Hill, which is, and I'll just quickly, if your indulgence, explain it so that you can then ask the officers to make a ruling as to whether they feel it's minor or not. Basically, it's talking about the issue of fire and the BAL assessment that was included in the report, and also talking about the need for biosensitive urban design next to urban bushland, which is a fairly standard requirement these days, where you have a bush forever or bushland site. You do need to make sure that your subdivision and ultimately the outline development plan deals with those aspects, and it wasn't necessarily picked up. So the landscaping aspect of this was picked up in the report. The biosensitive urban design wasn't. So I'll let you rule on that with the officer's advice.
Thank you. Yes, I've just had a read of that. It doesn't really particularly upset me. So perhaps the officers, if we could just get some quick thoughts on this, and so we can move this one along. Thank you.
Sure. Through you, Chair, just to clarify with Councillor Sullivan, it's more about species of trees rather than broad structural changes of the subdivision this particular point?
It slightly picks up on I think what Councillor Groom might have said about the making sure there is enough area in the lot configuration to support, particularly along Clontarf Road, to support the type of landscaping that's going to be needed to both create that biosensitive urban design and also, and it's sort of almost contradictory in a sense, so it's a challenge, I acknowledge that, to also ensure that landscaping, as far as reasonably possible, reduces the risk of fire that you get when you're building right next to a bushland. There is also, which is something that was said in the report, that the linkages needed to be sufficiently wide to accommodate the type of landscaping for that regional link, so that bushland areas are linked with bushland landscaping, not necessarily bush itself, but complementary landscaping that allows for that green linkage connectivity.
Yes, so through you, Chair, I think because the recommendation does talk to the fact the proposal doesn't meet those high quality design outcomes, one of them being the generosity of those spaces. This really just elaborates on the landscaping approach within those spaces and what would need to be factored in. So I'm okay with that being a minor amendment to this one.
Okay,
I would also say, if I may, before you rule, the issue of major and minor amendments is put into our processes, primarily dealing with things where it has an impact on either an individual applicant, if you like, a household applicant, or a neighbour or the like, so that there is a fair opportunity that they get to see the recommendations. When we're the decision maker, we're not the decision maker here. We're making commentary to the West Australian Planning Commission that has come out of either the officer's report or what our residents are asking for. And I think some leniency on whether it's major or minor is probably reasonable in that context.
Thanks for that. Yes, I'll rule these as a minor amendment. So I take it Councillor Sullivan has moved these minor amendments. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Groom. Any comments? Councillor Law.
Yeah, just a quick question about at the very beginning of these, where it removes the words possibly Strang Street. I believe that was did I read that correctly? About high density. There, I just wanted to check with yeah, down there. So I mean, I just wanted to check to make sure that was an intention that everyone was going to do, and maybe ask the reason why you're removing them.
Yeah, Councillor Sullivan, you can answer this.
Given the workshopping nature of the multiple amendments, I think it's only reasonable that we deal with it this way. I decided personally that we should take that out, that the primary focus should be on Naylor Street. And I also, I'm just being reasonable in that I know it's a difficult product for the developer to come forward with. And so I thought it was better for us to say specifically where we really want to emphasise an opportunity for that product. And to me, that's Naylor Street, and it's probably near the intersection of Culver, because that feels like the logical way that anyone would be transitioning from the subdivision areas and the areas to the east, and the more commercial and district centre areas to the west. So it's really about being quite practical and reasonable. So I'm happy for Councillor Groom to either say yay or nay on that.
Any other commentary on this? No, it's been moved and seconded. I'll put the minor amendments. Those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you. We move back to the substantive recommendation as amended. That has been moved and seconded. Anybody wish to speak on this?
Sorry. I just want to ask a question of procedure from here. I mean, obviously we don't know what the Planning Commission is going to do. But is it open to the applicant to work with the city, and or do they now get pretty well locked into a decision process at the planning commission? So is there an opportunity to almost mediate this before it goes to a decision?
Through you, Chair, effectively, yes. It's in the applicant's hands if they want to negotiate with the Commission for additional time for everyone to get together and work through. Out of our hands, though, we need to get a comment to the Commission, but from here we send our comment on, and the Commission will undertake their assessment, reviewing the city's comments and assessment, and the applicant can discuss that with the officers at the department. I expect we'll be kept informed about how that proceeds. I can't imagine they would determine one of this scale under delegation, but it would be through their committee meetings, which aren't public meetings either. It's probably just worth noting.
Thank you. Okay, ready to vote? All those, did we vote? No. Oh, Councillor Lawver, you wish to speak now.
Yeah, on the substantive motion, just real quick, I just want to thank the staff and Councillor Groom and Sullivan for all the work that's gone into making this report or these comments, I think, a lot better and a lot stronger. It definitely isn't easy, and just appreciate everyone's efforts on that. And there's been a lot said about a lot of things that I won't repeat now, but just wanted to point out there are some other issues that are identified by staff in the report, things like waste management and things like that, that are also equally important. While we spend a lot of time talking about housing typologies and canopy coverage, I don't want to give any disservice to the other issues that staff have raised. So hopefully the applicant can look at that holistically when they come back. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, all those in favour of the substantive motion? Thank you. That is unanimous. Thank you, and thank you to the applicants for your patience, and thank you to the poor, long-suffering people in the audience for your patience as well. Okay, we'll move straight along. The next item is PC 2310-2, Marine Terrace, number 96. And we have Matthew Ty to speak. Is Matthew still here? Good. Matthew, if you could come up and I've got your name, but could you state your address, please?
Yeah, it's Unit 3, 6 Grey Street. 6? Unit 3, 6 Grey Street.
Grey Street, okay. Cheers.
Yeah, so I live on Grey Street to the east of the proposed development, and I'm also representing a number of the residents impacted by the proposed development. Unfortunately, John White, who's the resident of Unit 1, can't be here tonight, but aside from the properties to the south that the planning officers picked up that's severely impacted, his property is perhaps the most impacted on Grey Street. Now, I note that it's been proposed to be refused, but should on a number of guidelines. But should the various design guidelines and codes be overlooked and the development approved, the building will dwarf his property and lead to afternoon overshadowing to his outdoor spaces, rear bedrooms, and balconies. The overshadowing also extends to the gardens and rear accommodations of units 2 and 3. Even with the supposed deemed to comply setback of 1.5 metres at the eastern boundary, the first floor of the proposed development will almost be in touching distance from the Unit 1 balcony. You'll also be able to look straight down into their outside space and the living area of the proposed development. I can't emphasise how close it is. You could literally get a broom and tap on their window. But should the council consider granting approval, even though the planning officers recommended the refusal, the residents request that they first visit the units on Grey Street and the bordering properties on Russell Street, so they can get a real understanding of the mass and scale that this proposal would mean for the residents on Grey Street. It certainly dwarfs all the buildings around us and essentially blocks all our light and breeze in the gardens and rear spaces. Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Matthew. Yep, well said. Right, the only other speaker we have is Peter Merger. Peter, have you got your 3 minutes ready? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll be quick tonight. I'd just like to start off by thanking the councillors that attended our meeting on Monday. the four councillors for coming out on site to discuss the proposal. Unfortunately, the application is being recommended for refusal tonight, primarily on setbacks and overshadowing. They're issues that we've tried to work with the city during the process to resolve. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get there. However, there were some positive signs at the council at the meeting that we had on Monday, and we did present some options today through an email to try and resolve those issues. So, what I'm asking for this evening is a chance to defer this item so we can come back in about a month's time. That will allow us the next few weeks to try to I guess, redesign the proposal, address setbacks and overshadowing, come up with something better and improved, something that hopefully the neighbours will appreciate as well. Hopefully the aim and intention is to come back with a recommendation of approval and the support from councillors. So thank you, Chair. I hope that the council will vote to defer the item tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for your efforts. Okay, there's no other speakers. I will move the officer's recommendation, which is on page 51, noting that there is an alternative recommendation for a deferral. Do I have a seconder for the officer's recommendation? Oh, Councillor Sullivan. Yep, all right. So it's been moved and seconded.
I just have a question. Oh, no, not of the applicant, of staff. If given the interesting nature of this month's layout of council meetings, would a deferral only be for 1 week, or can it be deferred to a meeting past that date, past the next?
Like most referrals, we could refer it to the next appropriate council meeting, and then that leaves it open for the applicant to let us know how much time they need and officers to chat to them about if they are intending on updating plans.
Yeah, I signalled that we might consider, and I always get this terminology wrong, whether it's a deferral or referral on this project. Certainly, I'm not in a position to approve it as it's presented. I think it's an incredibly tricky site, and there's very little that can be done to meet the requirement to kind of around overshadowing in June. But there are things that can be done to reduce the overshadowing overall, and I thank the proponents for doing a lot of work this week to try and see what could be done, and that there have been some options sent through to us today to suggest that the situation could be improved. And so I would like to move that we look at deferral/referral, whatever. After 4 years, you'd think I'd know, wouldn't you? Anyway. So that we give the proponent an opportunity to have a look at that. And I am, quite convinced from meeting on site that they want to stay on this site for the long term and they want to be good neighbours. So, hopefully they'll be able to look at a range of impacts as they review the house. It's a tricky site, but it's also a pretty big house that's been proposed, so there is some room to move and some room to tweak.
Councillor Sullivan, your button's not working, is it? Your coloured button's not working. Oh, there you go. That's better. Yeah.
So I noted that obviously Councillor Groom just moved her, but is it to be treated as a procedural motion, or is it treated as a separate motion that we only get to if we vote on this? So I just want to check that before we go any further.
My view would be to vote on the officer's recommendation. If that doesn't get up, then we move straight to Councillor Groom's referral, and then we'll vote on that. Okay.
I mean, my view is the only reason I moved, I will be supporting Councillor Groom's motion. The only reason I moved or seconded, the main motion was because I saw this as a procedural motion and we might not be able to get to speak about it. But if it's treated as a normal alternative recommendation, which I'm hearing or seeing nods from the staff, then I would withdraw my seconding of the the motion and allow Councillor Green to move straight to hers.
Bit complicated, but to make it nice and sharp, seeing no one else wishes to speak, we will note that Councillor Sullivan has removed his second nomination, so this motion now lapses because it did not have a seconder. So we can note that the refusal motion lapses. Just making sure everyone's up to date around the table with that one. Yep, and the applicants. And Councillor Groom has flagged that she's moving a referral of the application
I'll
to
move
administration, and that has been seconded by Councillor Sullivan. And that is up on the screens for a look at. Councillor Groom. Speak. You don't have to.
Let's not kind of air the same things again. Take it as spoken.
Okay, anyone else wish to speak on this? Councillor Sullivan.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, it is important that we provide some understanding about what we as a committee have seen so far, what we've heard from neighbours tonight, what we've seen from neighbours in writing, what we've seen from our own eyes on site. So I think it is important because we're trying to, in a sense, give guidance to what needs to be amended. It is a really tricky site. And it's a really tricky set of planning rules where single residential and some America's Cup period group dwellings sit alongside a marine terrace planning scheme and policy that basically calls for a much more dense urban edge to be built along marine terrace. And then we have the juxtaposition of a heritage house and existing setbacks that are quite set back from marine terrace, where actually the scheme is suggesting nil setback is desirable up to 3 stories. So we do have complexity in this site. These sites along marine terrace were always intended way back from the 90s to have much denser, bigger, taller development. And we have to try and find the right solution that allows for that sort of outcome whilst mitigating as far as reasonably possible the impacts on the pre-existing developments that exist. It's important to note, and I just wanted to flag it, because having seen the opportunities to change the overshadowing, which is a major issue to the south, we know that with the sort of development and densities that are allowed, there is it's not going to be a perfect outcome by any stretch of the imagination. But there are opportunities which the applicant has demonstrated to change that overshadowing. I would also, and I having looked at it, and I would flag, I think option 1 that they showed was the most reasonable in terms of providing relief over a longer period of time during the day. And I just wanted to say that because there were 3 options. But I also happen to think that the heritage advice that was given through the staff, perfectly reasonable, understand why it was given the way it was, pushed this development to the east, which has then had the impact of creating the juxtaposition that was talked about before, about a broomstick away from someone's balcony. I personally, having seen it and thought about that whole precinct along Marine Terrace, feel that the building doesn't need to be set back quite as far as was ultimately put forward. And I would have thought that moving the building forward by about 1 metre and giving another metre on the eastern setback would then provide at least a garden space where some mitigation through landscaping and the like could at least be achieved on the eastern boundary. And I would kind of like to see that as an option when it came back. And I wanted to state that here rather than wait until a month's time, just in case all of my colleagues go, that's a terrible idea, shouldn't even think about it. I think we should be thinking about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Councillor Lawther.
Yeah, I just want to thank the applicant and acknowledge that this is a really, really tricky site, and you've come a long ways, and I'm happy to provide some more time for you guys to continue on that journey. And I appreciate what Councillor Sullivan said. I would agree with all that. And I just wanted to point out that the restoration of that heritage building is really great. And I wanted to say basically, thanks for taking that into consideration in your overall plan as well. But I'm excited to see how we can have this brought back to us with less of an impact on the neighbors, and hopefully that will be soon, because I'm excited to see something built.
Put the microphone on. Oh, it's been moved and seconded. Yep. So all those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you to the community member that came in and to the applicants' representatives that came in. Right, moving along, we go to PC 2310-3, High Street, number 185, change of use for serviced apartments. We have a number of people to speak for the officer's recommendation on this one. The first one is Minerva Tubbs. You wish to speak? Yep. Can you just state your address, please?
Yes, Councillor Gray, my name is Minerva Tubbs and I live at number 10, 185 High Street.
10185, thank you.
Away
you go.
Yep. I just wanted to raise a point that under the community heading in the in your agenda, where it says that the application was advertised in accordance with Schedule 2, Clause 64, it's my understanding that that did not happen. As residents, we have concerns about that. We've only learnt by chance that this was actually being put forward to you today, and therefore we've had no opportunity to submit our objection or concerns to this, and hence that's the reason why I'm here today with some fellow residents. Another concern is that currently Mary Tay, who is a proponent of this proposal, currently owns 7 of the 20 lots at 185 High Street, and her husband Richard Tay manages gallery serviced apartments. There are 10 of those, so there are 10 short stay apartments already at 185 High Street. So this will bring the number of short stay apartments to 14, which we are opposed to. My fellow residents who are about to speak will talk to you about how it is disrupting our peaceful enjoyment of our residences. Also, we do have concerns about the additional doors that are going to be placed at the front of the street facade. There will be an additional 4 doors put directly on the street frontage. And we also have concerns that there is no diagram in the plan which shows how the current internal doors, which have access to our private foyer, what is being proposed to have being done with those. So we do have concerns about security and the risk that it poses to the current residents who live there. Also, the application says that there is no acoustic report currently presented, and those 4 apartments will be directly underneath our apartments, and that noise obviously will filter up towards our apartments, and we already have adjacent to our apartments, the council has approved a tavern, which is adjacent directly to our bedroom. So with that in mind, I do ask that you consider that in support of the current proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Minerva. We'll take those comments on board. Ian Tubbs. Must be Mr. Tubbs. Yep. Thanks, Ian.
Good evening. Okay, I've been in the area probably 5 decades. Big supporter of Fremantle and getting the community, so much so I've put in an application and in the process of having a JP status to be applied and help out with what's in the community here. Our concern with this is that we weren't notified about this proposal, which is why we're here. We've got serious concerns about the parties, ongoing parties that occur in the Airbnb facilities, so much so that we've had police out on occasions, and we've got a lot of storage of Airbnb items in the common area. So when an Airbnb needs to have less beds, it's been stored in our common area. There's been a few challenges around that, also with parking and the use of our bays by Airbnb people. So we come home from work, somebody's in our bay, and the general lack of support to get rid of those people in our bays. We've even got tradespeople that are using those. Our other major concern is the misuse of the FOGO bins. We've got an excessive amount of bins sitting in our right of way. We don't have enough room, and most of the Airbnb rubbish is thrown into mixed use, and we're trying to be a bit more environmentally friendly by using our FOGO bins. I've even had communication with your Jerry Anderson, waste management team leader, on the misuse of the bins where we've had building rubbish, a lot of misuse in the bins, and that doesn't help us in any way. So we're not supportive of it in any form, whether it be redesigned or changed to presented in a different form. We think that the ground area is really what you've put in your recommendations is to refuse it is exactly why it shouldn't go ahead. That's all for me.
Okay, thanks, Ian. Any questions from the committee? No? Okay, thanks, Ian. Jeanette Anderson.
I'm Jeanette as well. Hi.
Oh, you're Jeanette. Oh, well done, Ian.
Jeanette is one of the other owners within the building, and she couldn't make it, but she asked me to read out this. We, as the owners in the building, we were not contacted prior to the proposal being presented to the council, contrary to the Strata Titles Act, which is another thing that they've been talking about. We found out by sheer chance a couple of days ago that the proposed change of use and development. My question is, why were we not notified of the development for the change of use on the building, which affects all the residents in the building? And the next one is, contrary to the Mayor's alternative recommendation, the proposed change of use and development will in no way enhance this area. It will adversely impact the amenity of our residents and impact the already dire parking situation that we have. Therefore, we strongly are opposed to the proposal. That's from Jeanette Anderson, and she's apartment 17.
Sorry, Angela, all yours.
Thank you. I'm a long-term resident. I've been in the building for about 15 years, and I've witnessed the mismanagement of the short-term rentals by the applicant Mary Lee and her husband Richard T for the entirety of that time. As my fellow neighbour has mentioned, there's countless examples of parties and antisocial behaviour, regular breaches of our bylaws, such as smoking in the building by the holidaymakers, and a lack of compliance with the separation bin by holidaymakers, the applicants and their staff, and the repeated issues with short-term tenants parking in our allocated bays, often rendering us unable to park at our homes. Some of the more serious breaches for me as a resident by the applicant and their staff are to the fire safety regulations of the building. So things like the fire safety doors being propped open, there regularly being large bulky items including linen bags, trolleys, items of furniture in our hallways and including our fire escapes and stairwells. The aforementioned issues are almost daily, and whilst in isolation they may seem minor, they happen on a multiple basis and on a daily basis. And most importantly for myself as a resident is we cannot resolve any of these issues internally because there's a complete absence of relationship between the applicant and most of the residents and owners of the building. Basically, there's an ongoing refusal for the applicant to communicate with any of us, and when we do get communication is extremely hostile. So in my mind, the applicants have got a solid track record of neglecting the building and working in direct opposition with the comfort and safety of the occupants, and I envisage this worsening if they are granted further licence to use the building at their total discretion. The applicant, her family members and her accountant are the sole members of the Council of Owners, and her lawyers typically chair her AGMs. So there's really little opportunity for us to have a voice in any forum as residents of that building. And I think it's of note that our recent AGM excluded any mention of the proposed changes to the use of the building and its facade, which flags additional concerns for me regarding the lack of transparency, courtesy and cooperation afforded to the existing strata members by the applicant in her business interest. I welcome the Council's position on denying the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. No further speakers on this item? Nope. Okay, last chance. Right, before we get to move the item, can I just ask the officers, the thing that the applicants weren't notified, or they've only found out today, or is that something that's gone askew in the system, or you've got an answer for that one? Thank you, Manager.
Through you, Chair. I can see on the system that we did advertise, but it's pretty evident by the speakers today that not everyone did receive their notification, so something may well have gone wrong. The recommendation is for refusal in accordance with the concerns from the submitters. And if Council did want to approve the proposal, it's not a land use that is required to be advertised. So it is a discretionary use, not an A use under the zoning table. So Council could well defer it and ask it to be re-advertised if they chose, or they could make a decision tonight without knowing if advertising has been completed in full. But I would need to take that question on notice to check exactly who has received a letter, or who's been sent a letter, rather.
Councillor Green, you got a question?
Yeah, and officers may or may not be able to answer it because it probably starts to step into the kind of strata relationship, and whether this application is from the body corporate or from the owner, and what, I guess that varies in all bylaws, or what's the situation?
So we can't really comment on the strata titles requirements and the bylaws. That is a separate approval process. But the owner who owns that unit needed to provide authority to lodge the application. It may well be that even if this does get approved under planning legislation, that it could be refused under strata titles requirements. Flipping it the other way, if it gets refused under planning, it doesn't then mean that if a strata approval is given that they can go ahead, because the planning legislation still stands as well. So if either one refuses it, then it can't go ahead.
Okay, all right. I think that's no more questions. Good. I will move the officer's recommendation, which is printed on page 60 of the agenda. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Lawther. Anybody wishing to speak on this item? Councillor Groom.
Yeah, so when I first saw this proposal, I was definitely quite opposed, and I think I've argued loudly before on these kind of alterations to premises that were never designed to be lived in, that the amenity outcome is unreasonable. I then tested my own thinking as to whether that is kind of old-fashioned, and there are people who want, are less concerned about fresh air and all the things that concern me. But I am quite convinced from what we've heard tonight that this isn't the right proposal in the right place, and so very supportive of the officer's recommendation.
Mayor Fitzharding.
Yeah. Look, I did ask for an alt-rec on the basis that we get stuck if we don't support the officer's recommendation, and then we don't have anything else on the table. And I appreciate Councillor Groom's kind of additional comments to that. I think it's been really useful to hear the specific situation about this strata, and that sounds actually more concerning than any planning proposal that we have in front of us. Not a matter for the planning committee, mind you. I do want us to challenge ourselves in a state of housing crisis about how we can better activate ground floors. What I'm really concerned about when I walk around the city is that our planning rules have required us to build a whole lot of ground floors for mixed use, and it is being used for absolutely nothing. It is vacant space adding to already vacant space that we work really hard to fill in the city, but it does concern me that it's a dead end. It just sits there vacant, and we've required it to be built, and I can't walk past that every day and think that's a really good thing. So when things like this come in front of us, we have to look at that on its merits. The merits here are a little bit flaky, but more broadly, I think when these things come in front of us, we have to really challenge ourselves, because at this point in time, sure, this is for short term, but we know that there are people living long term in short term right now, not that they should necessarily be in this case, because the housing crisis is such that people are being pushed out of the market left, right and centre, and that just really worries me broadly. So if there are shops sitting vacant that actually could turn themselves into reasonable places for people to live, ideally as they move into more secure and more suitable housing, then I genuinely think it's better than some of the other alternatives people are being faced with right now. So I want to stay open to it. I suspect the officer's recommendation will be supported tonight, and I suspect that's a good outcome. But I think we do need to challenge ourselves going forward as to what we do with these kind of spaces.
Councillor Sullivan.
Yeah, thank you. When I first saw this, it was just an automatic no for me, but I thought I better do my due diligence and really properly assess it. It was an automatic no just based on the way the units were configured. I thought, in all reality, if you were going to have short stay in that location, you sure as hell wouldn't want it to be designed the way these were. The type of amenity that someone living in those spaces would have was appalling, and so just on that basis, I wouldn't have been able to support it. What I've heard tonight kind of makes me have a better understanding as to why that might be, but I don't need to speculate on that if we refuse it. The reality for me was also that High Street, along with Adelaide Street and Queen Street, are designated in our scheme, in our policies, as streets which are the primary streets into the city. They are the main walking routes, the main driving routes, the main boulevards, if you like, coming into our city. And it is within the city centre. And so, whereas other streets like Cantonment Street or Point Street or the like, we would accept residential at the ground floor. Typically, we don't accept residential at the ground floor on those primary streets. High Street East is a little bit different in that it wasn't part, or parts of it weren't part of Amendment 49, which was the main zoning change for that area about 12 years ago, 10 years ago. And High Street East is probably one where, while it is a primary street, we could consider residential at the ground floor. But I think even now, I would still have reservations about that, notwithstanding what the Mayor just said. The notion that, we just have this proliferation of empty shops has been stated time and again that we're not actually faring too bad in Fremantle. And while that area might be empty right now, I don't imagine it will be empty forever. I want to highlight to ourselves that the number of times that I know where a development has gone ahead and we've all said, how are they ever going to fill that commercial at the ground floor? It's never going to happen. Well, that's exactly what they said at the biscuit factory in South Fremantle, and it's also what was said at the, I think, M27 on the corner of Charles Street, where opposite the local hotel. And all of those spaces are now full, and what they're doing is providing services to local communities and businesses and the like. So it does take time, but these things do get filled. And our vacancy rate in the city centre is getting better. In other words, more shops are going in and the like. And I have no doubt at that end of High Street that there are genuine activities. It had a medical type facility in there before. There are lots of medical facilities over the road. There's a bit of a hub in that area, and there's no reason why we shouldn't hold our ground, in a sense, to say that was what the use is meant to be, that's what it's built for, and that's what it should stay for. So I just want to give us the courage to say, you know, don't rush to the quick fix of this. Don't rush to an owner that says, oh, this is the only way I'm ever going to be able to make any money, because those things aren't true. And we don't need to rush to those quick fixes. Thank you.
Any further speakers? Nope. Okay. Well, the item has been moved and seconded. All those in favour of the officer's recommendation? That is unanimous. There we go. Thank you for coming in.
Good evening. My name is Michael Petroni. I'm the architect for the proposal. So contrary to the officer's recommendation, I would like to speak in support of the proposal, which, apart from the two items which I'm going to talk about in a moment, really does demonstrate a fairly sensitive refurbishment of a heritage building, additions to it at a single level, and generally a fairly good architectural outcome. The two items which seem to be causing some distress is primarily, firstly, that the applicant seeks to gain access to park two cars on the property from the western end of Jackson Street. It's a little bit complicated in that there is an existing curb let in, which is suitable for two cars, but unfortunately at some point in time, Western Power put a power pole about 2/3 of the way in that across that let-in. It does, I think, in summary, suggest that one car can pass to the west quite comfortably, but the passageway to the east would be reduced from what would be normally a 3-metre space to something like a 2.1-metre space. That's allowing for 0.5 metre close to the pole and 0.5 metre from the boundary. I think in this case, the normal concerns can really be put aside. Jackson Street, the western end of Jackson Street past Pierce Street is about 30 to 35 metres long. It's a complete dead end at the end where it comes to the railway. There is no passing vehicle traffic or pedestrian traffic past number 20, which is the last house on the street. So concerns about viewing angles and entering the street is not really a concern, particularly when the neighbouring resident, they park informally as it is, but at 45 degrees in half of the street in typical North Fremantle fashion. It doesn't seem to concern any other people in North Fremantle or the council for that matter. So I think in this case, it's a very, very, very low risk situation. The owners and the residents drive a very small car, and they're the people who are going to be using this crossover. The other item is really the structure which we're proposing around this car parking area. North Fremantle, in this little spot of Pierce Street and Jackson Street, has quite a lot of break-ins of cars, and their ambition is to have some secure parking. So our proposal is really not for a carport or a garage, but a pergola, which is secure and which plants will be invited to grow upon. So it's more of a landscape element within the space, which is not in front of the heritage property, but to the side, and I believe that it will have very minimal detrimental aspect to the streetscape, particularly in a location where lots of buildings are actually built to the front boundary, and there's a whole a sort of variance of different things in North Fremantle. So I would ask you this evening to support the proposal and contrary to the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Any questions to Michael Seamus, one of our eminent architects in town? No? Oh, Mayor Fitzharding. I'm encouraged to ask you
Michael,
a question.
Sorry, this may have been covered in emails while I was away on leave. It appeared that the door swings out over the footpath. So if you're a pedestrian walking along you might get a kind of surprise. Is that correct? Is that that's just what it looked like in the plans to me?
Yeah, we've submitted some amended drawings, which is the sectional door, so it'll just go up in sections, and that will not be the case.
Cool. It was worth going on leave. Thanks.
Yes, Mayor Fitzharding, that's in the additional documents actually, but anyway. An officer's amended recommendation. Right, no further speakers on that. So what I am moving is the amended officer's recommendation, which is on page 18 of the additional documents, and that does take out that requirement 3. Do I have a seconder? No, no seconder, so that item lapses. Or the item doesn't lapse, that recommendation lapses. There is an alternative recommendation that I have provided, and which is on page 24 of the additional documents, which is for approval with conditions. And I will move that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sullivan is seconding that. Yes, and I'll just start on this one, even though it's been a bit of a hot seat here tonight. I went out on site on Monday, I think it was, with Alyssa and Michael, so thank you for showing me through the proposal. And when you're out there, you actually get a very good feel of this little area. Okay, the lamppost is in an unfortunate position, but there is, for some reason, there is a crossover right where they're intending to go. So, you know, and as Michael said, no one walks down there, no one drives down there. It's a little real sleepy hollow of town, even though I appreciate the officers have to do the right thing and put the work in. But the proposal is certainly going to add to the streetscape with the continual doing up of the existing cottage and the new primary dwelling to the left, which is going to be linked, and yeah, I think it'll come out really nice. So anyway, that's about all I'm going to say on it. So anyone else want to make a comment before we vote? Councillor Groom?
Yeah, just briefly, I think it's a really elegant and smart solution to the house, so thank you. Of a beautiful scale and really sensitive. Thank you for the invitation to come on site. I didn't find it necessary because I think it's a pretty straightforward proposition. Yeah, well, I know. What I found really interesting when I first was looking at the reports and good old Google Maps was that prior to the current owner, the whole front of the house was obscured by trees and shrubs, which probably have more of an effect of obscuring the house than what's being proposed now. And we often agonise about things on the front boundary and at the same time encourage planting that has the same effect. So I'm very comfortable with the proposal and happy to support your motion, Councillor Graham.
Any other speakers on this one? Councillor Sullivan?
Yeah, just quickly, my original concern, which was also what the Mayor flagged, was the possibility of the tilt door going into the street, and that was very quickly resolved in the sense that they had already changed it to a segmented door, which makes perfect sense to me. I will also address, there was a little bit of concern for me about reversing vehicles coming out of that sort of environment, and I'm sure the staff had that same concern. But for me, that was mitigated in 2 aspects, or 3 aspects actually. One, it's not exactly a high pedestrian street because you're basically going nowhere unless you want to walk to the fence to do some train spotting. Secondly, it's a very open wire mesh kind of design, and while that offers very good sight lines as it will be when it is first built, if it does turn out to be covered in a beautiful vine, a passion fruit vine probably, the reality is any vehicle exiting that carport is probably going to be going at a relatively slow pace to avoid backing into the lamp pole. So I'm pretty confident that the degree of concern that anybody in our community could have is, as far as reasonably possible, mitigated by the circumstances. So I'm happy in this situation to support it.
Thank you. No further speakers, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you, and thank you to the representatives for coming in tonight. I can't get used to this button.
Thank you. My
Yep.
name's Jeremy Carter, 5 Manning Street. I'd just like to say that we agree with the officer's recommendation to approve the minor variation to the already approved DA. We don't have any issues with the conditions that are stated in the officer's report. I would like to mention, though, that we still have a good relationship with our neighbour on the southern side, number 7, and have kept him informed of our plans along the whole way. We just look forward to a favourable decision from council so we can get started. So, thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. Any questions while Jeremy's got the dice? No? Thank you. Thanks, Jeremy. All right, then. No other speakers on this one, so I will move the item. Seconder, please. Councillor Sullivan, got his hand up first. Anyone wish to speak on this? Councillor Sullivan?
Just very quickly, obviously this has been a long process for the applicant, and as we said last time, I really want to commend them for taking the opportunity to listen to the concerns that we had and to be prepared to modify the proposal to achieve both a good streetscape outcome and to, as far as possible, mitigate the impact on their neighbour. And it's always great to see an outcome that does that. So thank you very much from a community perspective.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Anyone else? No? Okay, so the motion has been moved and seconded. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Jeremy and crew, for sitting through the meeting. Good on you. Good luck with it. Okay, we now move, we'll give Solomon Street a miss because we've got some people here for Milky Way. So, number 1, Milky Way, we've got Chris Bong to speak. Chris, would you like to come up, please? And just your address.
Yep, good afternoon. My name is Chris Bong. My address is in 2B Smith Street. So I'm on the west side of the proposed building.
Yeah, I know.
So this site, I think I've been here at least 3 or 4 times over the years. So this current form of proposed building is pretty good compared to the last 2. I must agree. I'm supportive of the building with minimum impact on 2B Smith Street, which is my house. I'm seeking the council to insert an additional clause. I know that there are comments about it, about the right-of-way, because that right-of-way was constructed by 3 of us 15 years ago out of our own pockets. So I was just seeking that the building permits include a clause to make sure that right-of-way is put back to the original form or made good after the construction of that building. That right-of-way was constructed by 3 of us purely because I knew the construction. It was designed for a domestic use. So obviously I do have concern that if we have heavy vehicles going through that, it would destroy that right-of-way, which is a concrete. I can't remember the thickness of that concrete, but it's definitely not for not up to a standard of heavy vehicles. The other concern is I am in the middle of Cat Street and Smith Street, so my only access is through that right away. So if during the construction of the building, obviously there'll be a bit of traffic going around. I would just request that the access to 1 Milky Way is through Cat Street rather than through Smith Street. So that's on the eastern side, access to Cat Street for the new construction. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Anyone got any questions of Chris? No. We'll get to you. I'll get a clarification on the right away after the second speaker. Okay. Thank you. Martin Cox. Martin, would you like to have your 3 minutes worth. Thank you.
Good evening.
And just your address. Thanks, Martin.
Sure. Martin Cox, 257A South Street. So I back onto Milky Way, so I'm opposite Chris. I'm one of the other 3 proponents of the original construction of the laneway. So similar to Chris, just echoing, I don't have any comments on the approval of the dwelling. I'm not adjacent to that. My concern is around the use of the laneway, which we constructed some 15 years ago, which, as Chris has alluded to, was not rated for construction vehicles. So we would just simply request that it is made good to the current condition that it is. Our property also backs onto that, or fronts onto that laneway, and so we have agreed with Chris and our other neighbour how we will share that laneway for parking and so on. So I would request that the new owners meet with us and agree how we use that laneway for right-of-way and parking. So just those two concerns from me is the use of the construction vehicles, and secondly, agreeing with the new owners how we all share that laneway. Thank you.
Good, thanks, Martin. No questions, I take it. Oh, Councillor Lorver, do you have a question?
Just a quick question. Who owns the laneway?
It's a private laneway, and I believe it was a bit of a grey area who actually owns it, Councillor. And so our property, Chris's property, and the other property then developed it, graded it, put the drainage in, and then got the access to that laneway. I'm not sure who actually owns it, Chris.
Thanks, Martin. Thank you. While we're on that subject, I might hand over to the director, Mr. Kingdom, who I think may be able to answer this or comment on it anyway.
Thank you. Through the chair, as it's a private laneway, we don't have planning jurisdiction over it, but I believe manager of development approvals might be typing an advice note as we speak. So we certainly can add an advice note rather than a condition to ask the applicant to negotiate with other landowners, and we can be quite detailed in that. So certainly happy to add that if the chair is open to that.
Yeah, I certainly will be open to that. I think Councillor Sullivan's got a question.
Yeah, question of the staff, if that's okay. When the other subdivisions occurred, and I dealt with a lot of them in the 90s, there was normally a planning requirement that the laneway be paved and drained and whatever. And I'm guessing that maybe when some of the original houses were done, the battle axes and backyard houses, that there was that requirement, and that's how the laneways got paved and drained and the like. So I'm just wondering, when another person comes along and benefits from that, is there a requirement on them that they maintain the paved and drained driveway for the life of the development? The second question would be whether the making good of any damage would be part of a construction management plan, and whether, again, that is a condition of planning approval that we can include. Obviously, normally it would be about public realm areas like footpaths and crossovers and the like. But is it simply a matter of if a owner damages another private property, it's really a private matter? So I kind of like to see this as stuck somewhere in between, and I want to try and get some sense that if we were to require through planning approval that driveway, that the access be maintained in good order as a paved environment, and that tie that into the planning approval, and then there would be a reason in a construction management plan to say any damage needs to be made good. Is there a way of doing it that is reasonable? The manager, thank you.
Through you, Chair. Because the site the lot's been created through subdivision already, the appropriate time for upgrades and works to the right-of-way probably should have been imposed by the Commission at that time rather than through a DA, because it is a privately owned right-of-way, and this one I think is owned by an estate. So I think that's why the owners who abut the right-of-way have worked together to get the upgrades done. And you mentioned there the damage to a private property sort of between the owners, and that's effectively where I think we land. we can definitely, like the director referenced, put an advice note down to just encourage that developer to make sure that their construction vehicles don't firstly obstruct the right of way, so that access is maintained throughout construction, and that they don't damage, and if they do undertake works that cause a bit of damage, which may well happen given the setbacks and the scale of the house, that they do make those good. But it might be that it is a civil matter. There's a bit of a grey area there because it isn't the city's laneway. Like you say, if it was the city's laneway, a construction management plan would be the logical one, and there'd be verge bonds and things that would cover any damage. And yeah, works would have to be undertaken to fix things.
Oh, Councillor Lorber, yeah.
Just quick, I'm just thinking along what Councillor Sullivan said, and including it in that manner, because my mind turned to an approval that was granted, gosh, way before I was even living in Australia, for a business on Hines Road in Hilton, where trucks were not supposed to turn south onto Hines Road as a planning condition approval. And then now trucks are turning south and disturbing residents. Turns out that condition was just not enforceable. And so I'm just wondering if we can give something enough teeth, even though if it, was potentially something that was challenged, that we may not pursue it. We always have that option to pursue things or to not pursue things. But if we could just give it as much teeth as reasonably possible, I would be open to that, because and I don't know the relationship between the applicant and the residents around there. I'm assuming it's a good one, but just to make it as strong as possible, so it is clear that that's what we would like to see happen.
Manager, yes. One last comment, perhaps.
Look, it's probably difficult without me taking that one on notice, Councillor Lorber. My advice would always be that unless you're sure a planning condition is a valid planning condition, that it shouldn't go down, and that's why at this point in time we're suggesting advice, because it is a private right of way that the city doesn't have authority over, as much as I think a lot of landowners would like the city to be in control of these laneways, and it would be significantly more straightforward because there are clear mechanisms for the city to recoup costs from applicants if they damage things. I think, yeah, an advice note is probably the best approach I can suggest at this point in time, unless you wanted to defer the item and we could seek further advice from our field services team.
Well, have we moved and seconded this item yet? No, so we actually haven't got that far. So look, I'll move this item. Do we have a second for it to get it going? Councillor Sullivan's been very quick on the hand today. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. I'm just going to ask the officers, have you written up an advice note on this one? Yep, the manager will read it out. Thank you.
So just while the meeting support officer is getting it up on the screen, I'll read it out. The applicant's advised to ensure that construction vehicles do not damage or obstruct the private right-of-way, and ensure that any damage to the right-of-way should be made good. The applicant should discuss any upgrades, damage or works to the right-of-way with other landowners who access that right-of-way.
I think that's mostly about as good as we're going to get on this one. So if the committee are happy, could we add that advice note to the officers? You want to move it as an amendment? Okay. Well, the recommendation has been moved and seconded. So move an amendment. I'll move. Oh, one of you guys. Go.
So we can probably go straight to the vote.
Yep. Voting on the amendment? Right, that's unanimous. Okay, so as amended, any further comment on the item as amended? Oh!
I've got a very brief comment. Yeah. I just can't miss the opportunity. This is one of the houses that typifies when planning breaks my heart, because I so want to talk to the proponent about getting a design that's much better, that gets all the potential this block offers in terms of solar access and far greater amenity than what we are having to approve, because it ticks the R codes but doesn't tick the intent in any way. So just soapboxing for a moment, and I'll shut up
You're
now.
allowed
But
to,
this
yeah.
one, yeah, it's just all that's frustrating about our role in residential development.
Thank you for those comments, Councillor Groom. Hopefully they're not your last tonight, perhaps. All right. Oh, councillors.
Sorry, just quickly, just given that we have put that footnote in there, I think while the neighbours are in the room, a dilapidation survey would be highly advisable, and that's just making sure that you survey the condition of the right of way through photographs, and you actually go to the applicant and say, this is how it is now. We all need to sign this dilapidation survey to say we all agree that this is the condition that it's in, and that any damage the builder does, the applicant needs to make sure the builder makes good. So he needs to make sure that that's in the contract with the builder. So if you have good relations with the applicant, it's really advisable to do it that way and make sure that the builder is responsible, because that's where it all goes wrong normally. So just giving you a little bit of free advice on that one. Get a dilapidation survey, get the neighbour to agree to it, get him to put it in the building contract that they need to make good, because it's their responsibility.
Yeah. Oh, second, that sounds like we're coming close to an end, Councillor Sullivan. Gee whiz. I'll take you up on this next item. Okay, it's been moved as amended with the advice note. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. Hopefully you can get, as Councillor Sullivan said, a little bit of comfort out of what's moving forward. Good luck with it. And thanks for coming in and putting up with 2 hours of this. You've done very well. Rightio. The last item is Solomon Street. Number 6, Solomon, well, it's item 6, 83 Solomon Street. I'll move the officer's recommendation. Seconder, Councillor Lorva. Any discussion? I can see some finger there. Yeah, Councillor Groom.
I had a bit of back and forth with Chloe this week that some people might have seen. So this is a fantastically interesting situation where we're being asked to approve this house as though the lot, or as the lot as it is, not subdivided, even though there is every intent to subdivide the lot. That subdivision has to be approved, and we've even been shown the design of the house that might get built on that subdivided lot. But in us approving it pre-subdivision, the overlooking imposition on the neighbouring lot we can't consider, and the overshadowing of that neighbouring lot, which exceeds the overshadowing by 10%, we can't consider. Just back to my previous point, this is where the planning system is a complete arse, because for the future people living next door, their northern sun is being taken away from them. They will have overlooking of their rear outdoor living area, and we don't have grounds to enforce that, which could be dealt with now at this design stage quite readily to get a better outcome for both lots. End of soapbox.
Oh, that is a shame. End of anyone else wishing to speak on this one? No? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, I'll turn the mic on. 107. I've moved. Seconded, Councillor Sullivan. Any questions while we've got it open? Councillor Groom, your last chance. No? Okay, thank you. So it's moved and seconded. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Right, so we're down to no motions, no urgent business, no late items, no confidential business. I close the meeting at 8:09, and I thank Councillor Groom and everyone else for their participation. Thank you.